Welcome, welcome in, come meet my Bristol bro. Anything from this to that, my Bristol bro. So nice to introduce my Bristol bro. Anyone from him to her, my Bristol bro. Work with these hands, you see this hard form. Say with your chest, my pen is hardcore. Even at my desk, feel like a star-lord. And it shows how much we give it all for. Now it's time to give them all an encore. Till it's back to the drawing. Welcome, welcome in, come meet my Bristol bro. Anything from this to that, my Bristol bro. So nice to introduce my Bristol bro. Anyone from him to her, my Bristol bro.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to the very first Bristol Bros Valentine's Day special. Thank you for joining us. Love is in the air. And speaking of love, my Bristol bro, Sam, is here. What's up, buddy?
What more says love than underground comics?
Exactly. And I did warn people there might be some mild not safe for work content being shared today. So if you have small children in the room and you don't want to have the birds and bees talk, you might want to avert their eyes at certain points. Sam has assured me he's going to try to keep it as clean as possible so, we don't get in trouble with the YouTubes or anything like that. But fair warning, everyone. And we have a very awesome guest with us today. I want you to do the honors introducing him, and then I'll bring him on the stage.
Sounds good. So yeah, we have John Kelly's, or I should say Dummy's John Kelly, if I could even speak the English here. He's creator, owner, publisher, editor, so on and so forth, making zines. And the dude is super knowledgeable about alternative comics, underground comics, and the like. Has very tight connections with a lot of cartoonists in that area. So definitely super excited, and just one of the guests that I'm most excited to talk about, because what we have to show off today is pretty incredible, actually.
Awesome. Well, that's a hell of an introduction. I say we bring him on to the stage with us here. Everybody, introducing Mr. John Kelly. Welcome in, John.
Hey guys, thanks
you
for
doing?
having me on here. Really looking forward to this.
Thanks for being on with us and making the time. We appreciate it on Valentine's Day, no less.
I don't know. That means something to. It means more to some people than other people.
True.
I did some Valentine's Day themed posts on Instagram at around 5 a.m. When I got up. So
yeah.
I kind of fulfilled my duties. Although I think we're going to have a nice dinner tonight. My wife.
Oh, there you go.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, my wife worked for a cookie decorating place when we were first dating, so she absolutely despises these major holidays like this that would keep her working until 2 a.m. getting all the orders done. So
my wife worked in restaurants and bars for a long time when
Yeah.
she was younger, and same thing.
Yeah, so we don't do a whole lot.
I might take my girlfriend to a Little Caesars if she's lucky.
Okay.
Wow. All you can eat salad.
Hey man, the crazy bread can't go wrong.
True.
Right?
True. I'm not going to hate on that. Well, Mr. John, you have quite the varied resume here. So how did you first come to getting into comics and underground comics?
I've been around comics my whole life, like literally. My both of my parents read comics as kids, and you hear some people say that their parents didn't like them reading comics, and they had to hide them and stuff. And I think that was the case for them.
Right.
But for me, no. I mean, my dad bought me comics. He encouraged them. He would read the ones that I would pick up, and and I think even more importantly, my grandfather would read to me every day. I lived at certain points with my grandparents, and my grandfather would read to me the New York Daily News funny pages every day, and that's how I learned how to read. I'm told by my parents and grandparents that I learned to read at age 3 by reading Nancy.
Oh, wow.
Which makes a lot of sense, actually, because it's such a visual, easy, simple comic strip, and it leads you across the page. And it's I do know that I would ask them about certain words in comic strips and what that word meant. But I'd also use the art in the strip to figure it out for myself. If I didn't know what a word was, I would be staring at the panel, and sometimes I figured it out wrong, I'm sure, but anyway, I read from a very early age comics, and not just comics, lots and lots of other things, and so they've always been around me, and I've always loved all types of comics, and would go to flea markets and garage sales, and I didn't really have any money growing up, but I would have a few dollars, and I would buy as many comic books, used comic books as I could, and it didn't really matter to me what they were, just as long as they were comics. So I read, war comics, romance comics, funny animal comics, superheroes, crime comics, whatever it is. I just, from a very early age, I read all of them. And I also really, really love the old newspaper comic strips, which I saw at a fairly young age from Bill Blackbird's Smithsonian Book of comic strips, which is a very important book for a lot of comics historians. But I devoured that book, and I've probably, God knows, I probably have had 10 or 15 copies of that book over the years, still do. So.
Now, not to railroad the whole interview with questions from myself, because I know Sam is bouncing around like a little school kid over there, because I know he's so excited. But I wanted to ask you one more thing. Was Mr. Kirby, I got my Kirby thing shirt on, was he part of your childhood? Did you enjoy Kirby comics?
Yeah, and I still love Kirby's art. I think the thing with Kirby for me was he was maybe the first, probably, I would have encountered him mostly at a young age in the comic, the superhero comics, right? I know he did lots of other things. He did like the first romance comics, among other things, but his art was so singular that he might have been the first cartoonist in the comic book form whose art I could spot, like, every single spot, because it was strange. I mean, it was to me it was bizarre. It was sort of off model, like, in a sense, and I loved it because of that. The way that he drew hands and his mouths and eyes and really weird physical poses and stuff like that. I would look at that and I would just be mystified at times at what was going on in the art. And so I really liked it a lot. I had a harder time reading some of his later stuff because it was I don't know, it was harder for me to understand what the hell he was talking about with that, the mystical stuff that he was doing, like, in the 70s and stuff. But I love those Jimmy Olsen comics that he did too, and the Superman ones where he didn't draw the faces, but
Yeah.
everything else, they were just
He
great.
did draw them, but they made sure to go in there and
They didn't print his face.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. Yeah, you're not the first person to say that was kind of the first artist where you could pick out his style when you saw something you're like, oh, that's Kirby, because it was so unique.
Yeah, a lot of the newspaper comic strip artists, right? They're very recognizable because they had their own singular form and everything. Superheroes are all superheroes, right? And they tended to blend for me, but some of them were more recognizable than others, and Kirby certainly was the most recognizable for me at a really early age. I still like his work.
Awesome.
It's crazy looking stuff.
It is.
On Tuesday, we just had our mutual friend Dan Schlissel from Stand Up Records on, and he had kind of brought up a good point to me that I never really thought about, that his gateway to underground comics was Mad. Did you have a lot of experience reading Mad as a kid?
Sure, yeah, I read Mad an awful lot as a kid. I would not say that it was my gateway to underground comics, though. Although as somebody who writes about comics history, it certainly was the gateway for the artists who went on to make the underground comics. My gateway to undergrounds was, I mean, I've told this story before, but I had a friend who had an older brother who lived near me, and my friend lived near me, and the older brother did too. The older brother had a stash of undergrounds hidden in his room that I knew about, and we weren't supposed to go in his room. when he wasn't home, and we knew that he wouldn't be home for a while, hopefully, I would sneak in there with my friend and pour through those comic books. And they were, I was 11 or 12 or maybe even 10 years old when I first saw them, and I was way too young to be looking at them, and I didn't really understand exactly what they were. They were comic books, but they were dirty, and they were something that you shouldn't, dirty. They were, and not all of them were, right? But they seemed like they were bad and something that you shouldn't be looking at, and so that made them more interesting in a way. But I was, they would make my head spin. So that was really my my gateway to the undergrounds, and that all happened really at a time when my tastes in comics were sort of changing too. I when I was very young, I really loved superhero comics, but I grew out of that at probably around 11, and seeing the undergrounds and some other things made me still be very, very interested in comics, but they were different, and they were very different than the superhero comics.
Yeah, certainly. I think that nowadays there's definitely a lot more crossover with like underground comics and like superhero. There's some people that are messing around with that genre. Some I think I would categorize this more as bootlegs. But I think that people are starting to come around on undergrounds, being more than just not safe for work, just sex type stuff. You know what I mean? It could be more than that. So
unless it's Sam stuff, then it's all.
Yeah.
It's an interesting term because it's kind of misleading. There was certainly a lot of sex and drugs in the underground comics, but there was a lot of ones that they weren't, right? And there were superheroes in a number of the underground comics, but they were different than the mainstream superheroes, and a lot of times they were parodies. And I see the undergrounds especially of that early era, as just real forms of self-expression for the artists to do whatever they wanted to do. You know, it was an independent thing that there weren't really any rules, and that's what made them interesting. You know, it certainly is what makes them interesting to me in retrospect. If you're reading them and thinking about the times that they were created in, you know, it becomes a lot more than you know, gratuitous sex or whatever. Although, you know, as a kid, I was kind of fascinated by that too. It was just like, you know, what are these things, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I had an example I just pulled from my rack, but Zippy. This is a good example of like an underground comic that's like completely safe for work. I mean, there's some stuff in here that like maybe you wouldn't show grandma, but I think that like they publish this stuff in newspapers for the most part. So it's like just the aesthetic is very underground, but the subject matter isn't. So
yeah, and so Zippy is a great example of all of that. So you know, what Bill Griffith was, Bill had not planned to become a comic book artist. He wanted to be a fine artist, and he was very interested in the surrealists and the Dada artists. And I see Zippy as being his platform for that interest and continuing that interest, right? And I certainly am interested in all sorts of art beyond comics. I'm very, very interested in a million different types of art, and I love Zippy, and you know, I love Bill's work generally. He's also somebody who continues to get better and better every time he puts something out. His autobiographical work that he's doing now is as good as anything that's ever been done.
Do you still pick up any kind of mainstream or superhero comics, or are you pretty much strictly in that zone of the more underground indie type of stuff?
Yeah, no, I probably haven't read a. I'll tell. Well, I can explain it. I remember when my friend Ed Piskor was doing the X-Men series, right? And I was over his house while he was working on it, and yeah. And I said, well, this will be the first superhero comic book that I've read in, I don't know, 30 years or something, right? Yeah. You know, probably mainstream comic too, I guess. Although it's like, you know, what is a mainstream comic? What's not a mainstream comic? You know, I'm not being judgmental about any of this stuff. I mean, I just love that people are reading comics, and I just love that people are reading, period, right?
Definitely.
And looking at art, right? And there is so much great stuff out there, and the range of things that is out there now is really kind of mind-blowing. So there's something out there for everybody. And you know, I'm a champion of all of it. So I just, maybe it's not something that I particularly read myself, but I'm also somebody who is always writing about this stuff. So I'm doing a tremendous amount of research all of the time. So by that, most of the stuff that I'm reading is much older.
Yeah.
You know, it's very old in a lot of cases, right? And you know, you only have so much time in your life, right? And I write about specific periods for the most part, so I tend to read things that are, you know, from those periods.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting, you know, you mentioned that comics help you learn how to read. That was the same case for my dad too. My dad was the oldest of 8 and kind of got pushed into that role of raising the younger brothers and sisters, and kind of got left by the wayside when it came to some things like reading, and he taught himself how to read through comic books. So I think that's really something cool, because you mentioned that, like, you just care that people are reading them. And I think that's something that can be real special.
Yeah. I don't want to. I'm not. I'll put it this way. I've written regularly for the Comics Journal for like more than 35 years. I've really never written a review of anything, because I don't like writing them, and I also feel like it's for me, it seems like I'm not going to tell anybody what's good or what's not good or what they should be reading or not reading. I don't see that as my role. I write about the stuff that I find interesting myself. I have no idea or don't really care if other people, like it or not. Everybody should make up have their own opinion about what they like, what they enjoy, what they want to consume. So it's
Yeah, I agree.
big open world,
It is, yeah. Something out there for everybody, for sure.
Yeah.
You want to look at some comics? We can I can flip the camera down here.
Yeah, I love looking at
Yeah,
comics,
sure.
man.
If you have questions about anything that was in Dummy or whatever else,
Yeah,
surprise me.
we're going
Awesome.
to. I'm gonna ask some questions. Don't worry.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. You getting everything switched over, Sam? You
Yeah.
want me to throw you backstage?
Yeah.
All right, bud. There we go. It's just you and me, John. Now we can talk about Sam behind his back. Oh, wait, he can still hear us. Let's not do that. Oh, my goodness. He's getting his other camera set up here,
Okay.
and we're going to go over some stuff. What was it specifically that kind of drew you to comic strips and things like that? Was it just you wanted to consume any kind of comics when you were younger?
I guess there were particular comic strips that the art I thought was so odd and strange. I didn't understand it, so I became, anything that I don't really understand.
Yeah.
Automatically becomes interesting to me.
Gotcha.
And there were particular, the way that some particular comic strips were drawn, like Nancy's face, say, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
Right.
what is going on there, right? And so I would just stare at that, or even Dondi and little Orphan Annie's eyes, right? Like
Right.
all of that was just so bizarre and weird, and it just fascinated me.
Curiosity got the better of you.
Yeah, and I also, the thing about the comic strips, the old comic strips that were done in the 1920s or even earlier, they just had such a beautiful style to them, that I was very much drawn to them. I guess one other thing is that as a little kid, my dad was a carpenter, and he had a job where he was working at our local library, and he would bring me there with him on Sundays, and I would have this big library to roam around in by myself while my dad was working in some other part of it. And there were 2 books in that library that had anything to do with comics. So this is probably like 1969. And at that time, there weren't very many books about comics, right?
Yeah.
The library had 2 books. It had a book about Crazy Cat, and it had a book about Little Nemo. And so I spent many weekends, hours, just going over those pages and staring at Harriman's Crazy Cat strips and McKay's Little Nemo strips, and became very obsessed with those. And those were really my first exposed examples of the early comics, comic strip work. And you really can't pick 2 things to better things to fall in love with at an early age. And
Oh yeah.
they remain. Crazy Cat is. I love McKay, but Harriman's work is among my very favorite things.
That's awesome. Looks like Sam is ready to join us again. Boom. And we're going to give Sam the full stage here so we can talk about this.
Okay.
Here you go, Sam.
All right. So, I mean, this is obviously Dummy number 1, the Pee-wee's Playhouse special. So, yeah, I honestly didn't know about Gary Panter until a couple of years ago. And I was always a really big fan of just the art in general, but I had no idea it was Gary Panter art.
Right.
So having access to something like this is honestly pretty incredible, because I think that unfortunately Gary Panter is one of those dudes that kind of falls off a lot of people's radars, especially mainstream comics. But I think that once people kind of see like, oh, this was his art, they gain a bigger appreciation for it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Gary's by far one of my favorite artists and, well, people in the world. He's one of the most kindest, wonderful people you'll ever meet. And I just love his art. I can't say enough about it. And I was interested in Pee-wee's Playhouse only because of Gary's art, to be honest. It was to me, that's what it was. I was when this came out, I was, not a kid, right? I had just gotten out of college, a couple of years before the Pee-wee's Playhouse came out. So I wasn't getting up at 11 o'clock on a Saturday to watch television. So I was aware of the show because of Gary's art, and then other friends of mine worked on various parts of the Playhouse world, especially Mark Newgarden and Kaz, who did a lot of the artwork for the products. That there were a lot of products made for the show, and Mark was in charge of making sure that they came out to Gary's and ultimately to Paul Rubin's specs, and they made some amazing stuff.
Did I see in one of the paragraphs there it mentioned that Paul Rubens was some kind of an artist?
Well, he went to Cal Arts,
okay.
And he was a very interesting guy, and he went to Cal Arts and did all kinds of things before coming up with the Pee Wee Herman character. So he had a very good eye, and he's the one who spotted Gary's art in Los Angeles on probably either like a copy of Slash magazine or on a punk rock flyer. And he saw Gary's art and said, this is the guy who I want to be the visual, identity for this world that he was in the process of creating.
Oh, that's awesome. So you had an appreciation for it.
Oh yeah, he loved Gary's art. Yeah.
Nice.
Who wouldn't, right?
That's cool.
Yeah, to kind of give you retrospect, James, he was going to Cal Arts at the same time like Tim Burton was. So that's kind of the people that he's hanging around with, because he did Pee-wee's Big Adventure with Tim Burton.
Sense.
So yeah, kind of give you a perspective on there.
Yep.
So one of the things that I asked Mr. Don Simpson when we had him on the show, I should say, what the hell is in the water in Pittsburgh that all of you guys are just coming up and just killing it with comics?
Well, I moved to Pittsburgh in 2011 and was surprised and delighted to see what a great scene was happening in Pittsburgh. I had no idea. Pittsburgh has a long arts generally history. Andy Warhol's from here. the Carnegie Museum and is very important and supportive. And there's some great comic shops in Pittsburgh, and there's a bunch of really great artists. And so I was surprised and delighted. And when I moved to Pittsburgh, there was even a thing called the Toonseum, which was a small museum of cartoon and comics art located in the downtown area. And I a few years after moving to Pittsburgh, I became the executive director of that and ran it for a few years. So it's a very positive place for creators, and it's getting more expensive to live here, but it's still not as expensive as a lot of places. So I think that draws artists of all kind to come here.
Yeah, because I've never been to Pittsburgh before, at least for comic related things. And when I was up there last year for Eddie Con, I was blown away just by the quality of comic shops that were in, the variety of comic shops. It's like, you just don't see that anywhere, like Chicago, San Francisco, LA. But in Pittsburgh, it's there. It's kind of surprising. You wouldn't think that Pittsburgh would be the place, but it is. There's
a real variety of stuff. And I go to all of them, and it's hard to know. The only two places I've ever really lived are New York City and Pittsburgh. So New York certainly has a million great comic shops too. So maybe I'm just spoiled.
Sure. So I guess one of my questions is, how long did it take you to kind of like put this entire package together? And then how much, once you started to produce this book, when did it become a bigger project? I would assume that once you started to work on this, more and more of this stuff started to unearth, so you were able to add on to it.
Oh, no, just the opposite. So what happened was, Paul Reubens died, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been writing for the Comics Journal since 1990, I think. And when Paul Reubens died, I wanted to tell a story that I knew, but I don't think really anybody else, very few other people who didn't work on the show or the products knew, which was, really how the art direction and everything under, mostly Gary's control, with the okay of Paul Reubens, like how it all came together. And so I started talking to the people who worked on the show, Gary Panter, Wayne White, Rick Heitzman, were the people I talked to the most about that. And then the people who worked on the products, like Mark Newgarden and Kaz and some other people. And started asking them a lot of questions, and they were all people, for the most part that I knew, and in some cases were, very good friends with. So I again, some of them I've known for many, many, many years, and they gave me access to their archives of materials and art, and so it came together that way. I actually have way, 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 way more examples of art from the show than could have possibly have made it into a copy of Dummy. I have the stuff that made it into the zine represents about 1% of the stuff that I have, maybe.
Wow.
So it was more not a problem, but it was more an issue of trying to fit the right image in the right place for what was being discussed in the article at that particular moment. This thing could have been way a lot bigger. A lot bigger. The other thing is I wasn't planning on even doing this, if that makes any sense, right? Um, I I made this. I wanted to make one copy of a zine about the art of Pee Wee's Playhouse, basically for myself, with no thought that anyone else would ever see it. Uh, it was just something that I wanted to do. I had done zines in the 80s and 90s, and I missed them. And for a number of years, I had wanted to do them again, but for whatever reason, never really got around to doing them. But I, what happened was I was giving fairly regularly a talk at the School of Visual Arts in New York about the history of zines for my friend Mark Newgarden's class there. And so the idea of I wanted to show the students an example of a zine that I would do if I was going to do one. And so that's how that first issue came about. I mocked up a copy just for myself. And what happened was that other people started seeing it, and they asked me, where they could get it. And I was like, oh, I'm not really doing it. This is not a real thing. This is just a dummy of a zine that I would do maybe. But eventually it turned into what it turned into, but it wasn't anything that was planned. I really did not plan to be doing this in any fashion where it would be something that other people would be looking at.
Well, John, now that I know that there's 99% more of Pee Wee's Playhouse art out in the wild, I'm going to be holding your feet to the fire until we get a second issue.
Yeah, you're going to be bugging him, aren't you?
I could do 15 or 20 more issues probably.
Sounds good. Sign me up. All right. So this was something. What the hell happened in between issue 1 and 2 that the design and everything like that just skyrocketed? Because not that issue number 1 was bad. I think it's good, but clearly something had happened between the 2 issues that, like I said, the design work had gone up tenfold in this thing.
Yeah, maybe 100-fold. Like I was saying, that first issue, I had no plans on anyone else other than myself, and maybe I wanted to make a copy for Gary Panter and another copies for the people who I talked to for the issue. So it was not something that I really was thinking about, and that anyone else would be seeing it. It was just more of like like an art project or something, right? Once Dummy number 1 started selling a lot of copies, and I, decided, well, I guess I have to do a second, another one. It was clear that I wanted it to look way more. I wanted to up the game a lot in as far as the quality of the images and the scans and the design and everything. That first issue, I put together quickly, and I think it works fine for the content and the art there, which is kind of like all over the place, and loose art. For this issue, I worked very closely with my friend Mark Newgarden on making sure that every image looked exactly as it exists in the real world, right? So that meant the highest possible scans, and having a design that makes it look like a real magazine, like a serious publication. And it's because I think it's, the art should be taken seriously. and I wanted to show it in the best way that I could.
So, James, are you familiar with the Air Pirate stuff at all? Hope we lost you.
No, but I am familiar with Wally Wood.
Okay. Well, I think it's a lot of ground to trudge on. Obviously, it's a pretty long subject, but in layman's terms, John, can you kind of explain to the audience and to
Sure.
James like what it is?
Yeah. So the Air Pirates were a group of extremely talented and extremely young artists who, in 1971, created what was like a club or whatever it was. They there weren't a lot of groups in comics ever. I mean, there was the Zap guys, but they didn't. They did jams and stuff like that, but they weren't like a gang or anything, right? The Air Pirates, they wanted to take on Walt Disney because they saw Disney as being the most visible example in their culture of things that they didn't like about America at the time, and the way that the characters had been co-opted and sanitized and shoved down everybody's throat. So they wanted to be pirates and take over the characters of Mickey Mouse and some of the other ones, and they did. And so they put out a series of 2 comic books before getting shut down by Disney's lawyers, that were, got them into a lot of trouble. And they were so skillfully drawn that they looked like actual Walt Disney comic books. So they weren't exactly doing even parody, right? They were taking what appeared to be the Disney characters and just putting them into sort of atypical Disney scenes, right? But especially the artwork for the covers of Air Pirates 1 and 2, to me as a little kid, when I first saw them at age 11, I guess, I thought they were actual Disney, Mickey Mouse comics.
Oh, wow.
And so as a result, I wasn't really that interested in them at first, because I just thought they were Mickey Mouse comic books, right? And then I eventually opened them up and looked at them and I said, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And I don't know what the hell this is. But I mean, look at the thing that you're showing right now are their model sheets that the Air Pirates used to make sure that their characters, when they drew the Disney characters, were exact, that they looked exactly the way that the Disney characters did if Disney artists were doing them themselves.
How did they get away with this without getting sued, or did they get sued?
Yeah, they didn't get away with it.
I was gonna say
they didn't get away with it at all, and they got sued big time, and it was a court case that went on for almost a decade.
Holy cow!
And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it's a legal case that is still studied in law schools as an example of copyright and trademark claims. So it's a historic case, right? It's probably the most historic legal case in comics history. It went to the Supreme Court, and it's studied by generations of law school students.
Does it fall under parody and they changed things enough, or was it too
They didn't
similar?
change anything except
it's too similar.
They didn't change anything. They did exactly what Disney would be doing, except for the sex and drugs.
Right.
I mean, you look at that down there, that where your finger is on the Air Pirates Funnies #2, like that. It looked exactly the way that a Walt Disney Comics stories. It's actually it's lifted from a Big Little book, that was a Mickey Mouse Big Little book is where that art is referencing.
So what you're telling me is they didn't get away with it and they didn't win the case.
They didn't win the case, but depending on who you talk to in the Air Pirates, they view it as a victory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very extremely complicated story. It's a convoluted story. It's a long story. It's 92 pages of this issue of Dummy.
Wow.
It's nuts. And it is fascinating to me, at least. And I spent a long time putting this together, and I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible. And I feel like it is. So,
yeah, when I was texting with you, whenever that was a couple of days ago, and I was telling you, like, obviously you had written for the Comics Journal, but I was telling you, like, the Comics Journal the last couple of years, I think, has been kind of watered down. I'm like, this is exactly what I want as a Comics Journal reader, is like this. So just props to you.
Well, thank you. I don't see them as competitors, though. The Comics Journal does what it does, and they do a great job. They're the best at what they do, and I have written for them for a long time, and I still do, and I will continue to write for them. I'm doing my own thing with Dummy, and I don't know that there's been any other publication that is doing exactly what I'm trying to do with this, which is really what is, it's just like write about stuff that I'm interested in, and show off the best examples of the artwork that I can at the highest quality printing of that art that I can possibly do. We wanted to make each of these images in this issue look like it's actually just sitting there on the paper, that it's the actual piece of art.
All right, so I'm going to circle back around to the question that I asked you about the first issue, because you weren't expecting to make that first issue, but you knew we were going to be making this one. So how long did this take you to put together?
A long time. I'm here. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
The heater kicked back on, and I don't know if you could hear it or not, but this took more than a year to put together. I think the first issue I probably spent about, I don't know, a day. It took me a while to write it, but laying it out and stuff was pretty quick, because again, I wasn't even thinking that anyone was ever going to see it. With the second issue, I knew a lot of people would be looking at it, so I wanted to be as good as possible. So there, you're looking at some variants in secret agent cards there.
Yeah.
That's
Two
cool.
different scans is what it is. It's scans of two different actual cards.
Yeah, folks, if this stuff was limited, so if John still has some of this stuff, if you order the books from him, you get some of these extras.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, you won't get, if you order, you're not going to get everything probably that you're looking at right now, but you'll get some stuff.
Sam was on it early, wasn't he? Got in on all the goodies.
Look at this. This is good stuff, man. Like, I just love the dummy design. It's just really clean.
That took me 30 seconds to do.
That's why it works, man. Sometimes that's the best.
So what happened was I had that dummy of that first issue of the Art of Pee-wee's Playhouse thing and I was about to send it to the printer to print up like 100 copies of it, and I was ready to send it, and then my friend Mark Newgarden said, you can't print it until you give it a name. You got to call it something. I don't care if you call it John Kelly's Zine, but this thing has to have a name." And I was like, "Well, I've just been calling it my dummy of my zine, right?" And he goes, "Dummy's the perfect title."
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, "Oh, well, what should I do for the logo?" He goes, "Just do, Futura, bold, and so I did it very quickly, and it seemed like, especially on that first issue, kind of like the Life magazine flag or something. And I thought it was as simple as it possibly could be, and it seems to work.
That's sometimes those simple designs like that, just a
I mean,
nice clean design.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just such an absurd name for anything. You're calling your magazine Dummy.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. That I wanted the logo just to be very, very simple, and it is.
Definitely. It's simple, but bold and gets directly to the point, which I think is what it's all about.
Yeah, but also dummy. See, dummy means a couple of different things, right? Like, dummy. A dummy in the world of printing is like a prototype publication, right? So it's like the thing that you would be making and that you would be looking at, or proofreading and stuff before it would actually go to print, right? And since this thing was never expected, and at least in my mind, I was never expecting it to actually go to print. That's why the title really works for me, because that first issue was just the dummy of something that I would be doing if I was actually going to do a zine. I would clean it up and make it a little sharper or something, which is, I guess, what I did with the second issue. But I'm happy with the first issue too, though, also.
Yeah, second issue, definitely, like Sam said, it looked like a pretty big jump. You could tell you put a lot more time into that one, but the first one still holds up well.
People keep buying it.
The proof's in that, yeah.
Like, I honestly, I highly, highly encourage people to go over there and pick up the zines, even if it's just like one or two of the issues. I was super impressed. Like, I obviously, like I said, I read the comics journal. I pretty much pick up all Fantagraphics books, so on and so forth, like all that kind of stuff. And it's probably the most impressive publication I've seen in a while, just in terms of the design, the build of the book, the material in it, so on and so forth. Like, it fucking blew my mind, for the lack of a better term.
Thank you. I wanted it to be, especially for that second issue, I wanted it to be like something that, again, people ask me who my audience is, right? And my answer always is, it's me, right? It's something that I would want to see. And I wanted that second issue to be something that, if I were to have walked into a record store or comic book shop or something, and I saw it, I would have been blown away and was like, I have to get this, right? So that's why one of the reasons it took a long time just fine tuning it until me and Mark and a few other people were fine with the way that it was. There was a lot of tiny little changes that made it better as we got closer and closer to actually pulling the trigger on it. So, but I appreciate your comments on that.
Sure. Yeah, so we're gonna start wrapping it up here, and I know that you're working on a third issue. Did you have anything that you wanted to like announce for it, or have any news for the third issue?
Yeah, so the third issue it's a bunch of kind of pieces about things that I like, mysteries, right? Things that or things that I find mysterious, like why they exist, or actual mysteries. There's some pieces in there about some comic book artists that nobody really knows anything about at all, and they will know a lot more about them once the issue is out. And then there's also some mysteries involving some cartoonists that people are very familiar, or some people are very familiar with, like Dan Clowes and Charles Burns and Gary Panter again, and Jim Woodring and Mark Beyer. All of those guys will be in issue number 3, plus some other bizarre things. So it'll be chock full of mystery.
Awesome. How long have you been working on that one now?
Since the second one was finished finally.
Yeah.
So it's been, I don't know, 6 months or something, maybe more. It took a little bit of time to think about what I wanted to do for the third issue, and came up with a bunch of ideas, and then I'm like, no, and so but I working on that third issue every day, and finding out more information all the time. So I'm hoping that it'll be done. The plan is to have it done by the end of the summer. And if it takes longer, it takes longer, because it's like with that second issue, I could have released that thing a long time sooner, a lot sooner than I ended up doing it, but it wouldn't have been right. So I wasn't going to print it until it was I mean, nothing is perfect, but until it was right.
Well, John, I've learned a lot today. I really enjoyed it. I know Sam was super excited to get you on, and I was super excited to learn more about Dummy and learn more about you. So it's been awesome. Thanks for spending some time on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys.
Awesome, man. Sam, you got anything before we wrap up?
I mean, just keep buying comics, especially my comics. And then, of course, buy John zines. Again, cannot say enough great things about them. Highly recommend them. I'm gonna keep just shouting from the rooftops to buy these things. So,
one thing I wanted to add is like a fairly recent thing is that I've just joined this group called Power Pulp Comics, and so you can get Dummy at my website, dummyzine.com, but you can also get it at Power Pulp, and especially for retailers. I mean, Dummy's in a bunch of retail shops, but it's expensive to ship large quantities of these things into stores, and for stores to order from a bunch of different creators. One thing that's cool about Power Pulp is that especially retailers can order from a number of different people who are creating self-published publications, and the number of people in Power Pulp continues to grow all the time. And I'm very excited by that I've joined with them, and excited to see where they go. And I think it's going to be an incredible platform for self-published people.
Awesome stuff. Everybody that watched, thanks for spending time on Valentine's with us. It's been fun. Sam, always good to see you, brother. Everybody needs to make sure pop by Tuesdays at 7 p.m. PST. make sure we got something new to announce, Sam. Sam finally got on Instagram.
Oh, I
There
did.
he is. Samsational Press on Instagram. Make sure you guys go give Sam a follow. Keep track of him on there. He's finally on social media, ladies and gentlemen.
Amazing. It's crazy that I was even selling pages and comics and stuff with 0 socials to begin with. Think about that.
I know, right? It's almost like you can do it without it.
You can't proof it in the pudding, but what are you gonna do?
Awesome, guys. Well, listen, have a great rest of your weekend. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you, John. Take care.
Yeah, take care.